Hey everybody, welcome to the session. My name is Christopher Lewis, and I'm a lead solutions architect working in the multi-cloud management business unit. I think we're calling it modern applications and management business unit now, but I'll stick with multi-cloud management in VMware. So we're going to have a panel session, but I'm just going to do a sort of like a scene setting, if you like, to start with, and then I'll invite my colleagues up and we can have an open and honest conversation about multi-cloud and what's VMware Aria got to do about it. Honest enough that I have to put a disclaimer up to say that anything we do talk about may or may not happen. So I could tell you anything, and I'm covered, is essentially what I'm saying. Very quick agenda. So what's VMware Aria? I don't know if you've seen, I wasn't here this morning. You may have seen the slide before. But essentially, we have a journey to multi-cloud. And so essentially, in the beginning, there was cloud, and that cloud was cloud first, and lots of people drove towards the cloud first bandwagon. And that could be VMware Cloud, it could be public cloud, depends on who you talk to. And it was so good, they wanted more. But obviously, too much of a good thing could be bad for you. So we had the multi-cloud era, and that enabled us to get this sort of cloud chaos that we talk about now from a VMware perspective, having multiple public clouds, multiple sets of operational tools, multiple teams, really sort of giving lots of choice, but lots of choice can also add lots of complexity. So how do you bring order to chaos? From a VMware perspective, we like to think that by becoming cloud smart, that will help you become get rid of that cloud chaos that we talked about. And so driving a right cloud first strategy rather than an any cloud first strategy, making sure that you look at the application or the hosting requirements and decide where you want to put that application or that sort of business control. And really working on how that means that you can have multiple clouds, but you just use the right cloud in terms of you might use Google for one thing, you might use AWS for another, you might use VMware for something, you might use Azure for something else. So really understanding what all of those clouds are doing. But one of my favorite sayings is, it's a journey, not a race. There are still some customers here in this phase here, the cloud curious phase, as I call it. Do I need cloud? Am I doing cloud because there's this cultural fear of missing out? Everybody else is doing it, so why am I not doing it? But actually, if you think about it, and you're not doing public cloud, and you are the market leader, maybe your competitors are doing public cloud to catch up. That doesn't mean you shouldn't do public cloud. It means that you're doing public cloud for a different reason, and making sure you understand that's why you're doing it. I call this the do I need a cloud strategy. First, public cloud first, any cloud first, and then right cloud first. The screen's moving. So how do we become cloud smart? From a VMware perspective, again, using VMware Cloud, VMware cross-cloud services, and there are lots of them. Very briefly, what we're going to talk about today is this pillar here, which is the cloud management piece with VMware Aria. So asking the question again, how do I become cloud smart? Use VMware Aria. And it doesn't matter whether you're public cloud or you're private cloud, VMware Cloud, AWS, whatever you want to do, VMware Aria has something that will help you become cloud smart. We have sort of three tenets. We did last time I checked anyway. Automation, operations, and costs. And they roughly align to the product sets that we see here, all underpinned by the VMware Aria branding, bringing everything together under a single brand. As I tend to call it, the artist formerly known as the vRealize Suite. So whether we're doing cost visibility, whether we're doing monitoring and observability, or whether we're doing automation, we have something for you to do, or use, should I say. I was told I wasn't allowed to use the word rebrand, so I'm going to call it rebrand plus. But no, it's more than just a rebrand. So yes, we've changed some names of products, but we're adding a whole heap of new functionality as well. So yes, some of the products have changed. Our operations was vRealize Operations, automation was vRealize Automation. But essentially, the biggest part of the screen is the biggest part of this new portfolio is the Aria Hub and Graph, which hopefully we're going to talk a little bit about in the panel. But essentially, that's bringing everything together. So I created this slide based on the slide that one of my colleagues in Holland created. And we can, I guess, one of the reasons for Aria is to have this first pane of glass, or Aria Hub and Graph, should I say, is to have this first pane of glass management interface. And that allows us to have this holistic picture of all of the things that are happening to all of your applications. But actually, we can be considered part of the problem, maybe, in terms of the amount of applications or monitoring tools that we have and automation tools that we have that help you deliver the services. Now, that could also be that, we're talking about Aria guardrails here as an example. I'm using Aria guardrails as an example, but it could be another tool doing the same functionality. So it's more about the functionalities than the products, but I'm just aligning our products to it. So typically, you might have a customer who configures a landing zone and wants to make sure that's secure from a regulatory compliance perspective. And they may sort of want to use realized automation, or Aria automation, sorry, to deploy an application to that, or a hosting environment so they can write an application. And that same developer may develop that app, and they might use sort of Tanzu to do that, or Tanzu application platform, or whatever. But essentially, their role is just to develop that application. And then we have operational visibility, so the ability to monitor the hosting infrastructure and potentially the infrastructure applications as well from a support team perspective, and we have a product for that. And as the application moves along the cycle, we can now do, we also do log event monitoring. We have an application for that. It's a different one. But a cohesive solution between the two of them, but we have products. And then if you want to do network monitoring, so you want to see how the network or the application is communicating to other things within your network or the internet or various other things, we have a tool for that too. And so the story goes, if you want to do application observability and looking at metrics and traces and logs to see how the application is actually working inside and where those problems are occurring from an observability perspective, then guess what? We have an application for that too. Or a tool, should I say. Or a solution is probably a better word. And someone somewhere will want to know how much it's going to cost. And guess what? We have a tool for that too. You get the theme. Bouncing up and down. Hope nobody gets seasick. And then, as a data action, you might want to do some configuration management. Change, do some change in the way that the actual virtual machine is underpinning the application, if you're using virtual machines, is configured. And guess what? We have a tool for that. And guess what? You can also do SecOps, and we have a tool for that too. So as you can see, there are lots of tools in our portfolio that help deliver applications and services and business outcomes. But actually, that could be considered part of the problem. There's just too many tools, and you have to look at all these different interfaces to work out actually what's happening or what's interesting. And so what Aria Hub and Graph is going to be able to do is abstract that complexity necessarily. We still have those tools underneath because we're not getting rid of them. We still need what those tools do. But having Aria Graph at the center, which is the data model that allows us to sort of take information from all the public cloud services as and when we support them, plug in all of our cloud management products and provide some context and persona-driven views around that information. So what's important to you up front, and then using that to drive down into the applications or the tools or the solutions that we provide to give you lower level of complex detail if you want to see that. Add on to that an API, so we can access it via an API. Add on to that a user interface that, Sam might correct me if I'm wrong, but uses the API to construct, so that's our visualization of our data model, but there's nothing stopping you making your own visualization, but we think ours is cool, so use ours. But then what happens if we plugged in other services as well? So maybe you don't have Aria operations for logs, maybe using Splunk. We'd love you to use all of our products, but realistically, from an ecosystem perspective, that's not going to happen from day one. So if we allowed you to plug in everything that you use, that would be pretty cool too. And again, driven into the data model and then visible through Aria Hub and Graph. I'm going to try and stay still. And then once we have all that data model, how about we give you some tools that use the data in the data model to do things better in your business, whether that be the guardrails functionality, the business insights, or the migration functionality, so moving workloads from cloud to cloud. I think that would be pretty cool too. So that's where we're going. Skip that one for now, because I want to talk about... So, and hopefully we'll cover some of these in our panel session, but essentially, those are the 3 new capabilities that are currently either in beta or tech preview or initial availability. I can never keep up, but essentially they will be what is coming in the future. Maybe different names, but that's what we're looking at them at the moment. Time for the panel. Any questions? Hope there's going to be lots of questions for the panel when we get up here. So I'd like to invite Charlotte. Here we go. Charlotte, myself, Sam, and Michael from VMware to come up and join me on stage, and we'll answer some questions if you have any. If not, we've got some questions we can ask ourselves, so that's all good. We need another chair. Let's get you a chair. Cool. I'm going to sit right in the light if I do that. I'm going to sit over here. Yeah. Yeah, go on. I'll sit here. It's all good. You got a mic?
Whenever you speak, just pick up on the mic.
Right. Thanks, everyone. Hi, guys. Yeah, so Chris and I have started this Aria panel series. We did one about a month, maybe a month or 2 ago.
Yep.
And we've done it to showcase Aria, what we're doing, how we're helping our customers, and to really answer some questions that our customers want to hear more. So we've got some questions today, which I'll ask the guys about. And if you've got any as well, please just let us know. We would love to know more.
Is it worth? Sorry, is it worth getting? I know Michael and Sam are probably well known at the VMUG, but I think their roles have changed probably since the last time they came here. Is it worth introducing yourselves again and what you're doing? Yeah.
Hello. So Michael Poor, long-time VMUG attendee, member, presenter. I used to work for VMware's professional services team up until last year when I cruelly left them and got a new job inside VMware. So I now look after technical marketing for Aria automation and also Aria guardrails.
Hi everyone, you're a long way back over there. There's lots of seats at the front here, just saying. So my name's Sam McGowan and I'm a product manager for Aria Hub and Graph. So I'm primarily responsible for the integrations that we're doing, so the SDK that we're developing for integrations, so that bit where you saw like ServiceNow and the iPAMs and things like that, the GraphQL interface, the developer interfaces, and also the Kubernetes integrations for Hub and Graph. But I also am obviously familiar with the rest of Hub and Graph and the architecture and all that as well. And I've been doing that for about 6 months. Before that, I was doing the automation technical marketing that Mike's now doing.
Fab.
It might be a coincidence that those job changes happened at about the same time. It might not.
Great, thanks. And I suppose for those of you who don't know me, this is my first time here, but I'm one of the sales specialists within the multi-cloud business, and I came through the Cloud Health acquisition, so it's been really interesting to see how that has integrated within Aria and how we're supporting our customers around that space. So I suppose we might as well first start off with then, why has VMware launched Aria, and what does it bring over and above the vRealize suite? I don't know who wants to. So.
Do you want to go, Michael?
I'll start. So, well, I mean, I think you covered a lot of it anyway.
Yeah.
It's not just a rebrand. There's new functionality there. There's a desire to have, if you like, a single cloud management solution in a way. Admittedly, it's made up of multiple components still, but bringing those components closer together, integrating them more seamlessly, trying to enable people to stop having to do what we would call swivel chair management, where you're looking at one screen and you have to get to another to go and do another thing, you're back to another. We're trying to have a unified solution for all aspects of cloud management, and that's really what Aria is all about. So I'm led to believe that the name Aria was chosen because it's based on that element of classical music and aria, which is normally a piece sung by one voice, which is, I think the idea is that we're supposed to be singing with one voice, not necessarily just one person doing the singing. But yeah, that's the idea behind Aria, is that whole cloud management solution that can cater to all those different pillars and aspects that Chris covered earlier on.
I think it's also important that our customers have changed, and they've changed because their customers have changed, and that's driven by social economic impact, banking crisis, financial crisis, wars, pandemics, and actually, because people are moving to the public cloud just as much as they're moving on premise, to be fair. But our old solution didn't necessarily cater for public cloud first mindsets. And I think that's where we're trying to position ourselves, as in a truly multi-cloud, VMware Cloud being an equal citizen to the public cloud in our cloud management portfolio. That's the key message as well, I think.
Anything to add?
I think that covers it quite well, to be honest.
Tech marketing.
As a product manager, you want to see the messages that you're sort of shaping come down and like be marketed and be sold, and that's what's happening. So that's good.
Yeah.
I'm glad. So yeah, I suppose, Chris, I know you spoke about Hub and Graph, but what is like the guardrails, the migration? What does it do, and what might our customers benefit from those 3 new features?
So I'll give a very high level overview, but Michael's probably going to be better at it definitely from a guardrails perspective. But for me, migration is purely about our desire to support our customers' requirements, whether they be regulatory or other sort of compliance requirements, to move workloads across clouds seamlessly and quickly. We can't just, we can't stop a customer using AWS as an example, but we can help them to move out of one data center to another, or we can potentially in the future help them move out of AWS into a VMware cloud, or from a VMware cloud to AWS. It really depends on how far we decide to take it. From a guardrails perspective, for me, that's policy as code enforcement on your public cloud endpoints to make sure that you're secure and, again, regulatory compliant against CIS compliance and other benchmarks. The business insights, not 100% sure what we're doing with that at the moment, but essentially that's sort of taking all of your data and from your the metrics that we're collecting in those instances and pushing them into the sort of the graph database or the data model, and using that to drive help you drive decisions to help your environment run more efficiently, whether that be from a cost or a price perspective, but really leading you, not making you, but leading you to make those decisions. Because at the end of the day, it's up to you, whether you decide to do and action the recommendations we make.
Yeah, I think it was important to understand that those 3 services, the migration, guardrails, and business insights, they're built on top of the Hub and Graph platform. So, the Hub is a user interface. The Graph is really made up of 2 things. It's an entity data store where we where we store our knowledge of all of the entities within your environments, and the graph, which is a GraphQL implementation, which stitches together entities from various different data sources. So if you've got, if you've got an AWS environment and you've got monitoring tools that are monitoring AWS, or network tools monitoring that, you've got various different identifiers for any particular entity within that that environment. And what our GraphQL does is stitch those together and start building relationships between individual entities and other entities. So where applications communicate to each other, we can build relationships. And that GraphQL was created by Facebook for managing massive relationships between different entities. That's what Facebook does. It maps those relationships. And so what we built is a platform on which we can then create these other services. So when you look at how, for example, Business Insights work, Business Insights uses all of the information that we have on the environments, and uses machine learning to spot trends, to look for anomalies, to look for things that are root cause analysis for problems, and to bring those different bits of information together to say this is what is happening in your environment, and not only that, but this is how you can remediate that. And this is only possible because we're bringing together, network information, log information, metrics information, event information, and the various different infrastructure components. And so the way I always describe it is, Hub and Graph is a platform that we've built, and actually we're pretty much giving away Hub and Graph for free. What you get on top of it are these services, which certainly Business Insights, the guardrails, you couldn't build them without having all of those bits of information together. So, I mean, Mike, do you want to dig in a bit more into guardrails, seeing as that's your baby?
I certainly can. I mean, just to provide another example that I've used for people when discussing about that kind of stitching of information. I mean, if you imagine that, for example, you have Aria automation hooked up to, say, AWS as an example, and you use it to kind of provision out an EC2 instance. Well, in AWS, that instance has its own ID. It's got its own identifier in automation. It's got its own identifier potentially in operations. It's got its own identifier in Aria cost potentially. And those individual solutions do a particular job. What Hub and Graph is doing is basically joining those together so that this one instance, you can understand that it's been provisioned through automation. You can see the related costs, and because you've got all these relationships mapped out in the Graph database, that's what enables you to build these sort of value add services on top, to build things like Business Insights, to build a tool that helps you to migrate these workloads, these applications from one cloud to another, potentially. And when it comes to guardrails specifically, so if I want to jokingly put it, I suppose guardrails is a bit like Sauron. It's kind of the idea is it's a policy engine to manage other policy engines effectively, and doing it through code. So, for example, Chris had up on the slide earlier with things like secure clouds, secure hosts, potentially native public cloud policies and governance. Aria Guardrails is a way to define policies for all of these different sort of endpoints, and define those guardrails using code, and have that actually sort of enforced and kind of reported on. In addition, we're actually kind of merging the secure clouds and guardrails functionality together. So because there's a lot of overlap in what they do. So secure clouds enables you to evaluate your public cloud infrastructure against several benchmarks, CIS benchmarks, PCI, you name it, there's probably a baseline or a benchmark available, and we can actually enforce the application of those benchmarks against the infrastructure, get the findings back, and those, of course, are then surfaced up into Hub and Graph, where they can inform business insights potentially, or at least give you an idea of what your security posture or compliance posture is on your native public cloud accounts.
Cool.
Fab. Thank you. I suppose one of the other points that I wanted to, I know we've spoken quite a bit now about Hub, but I think sustainability now is a really big thing within all the organizations. So I know organizations are under increased pressure to reduce energy consumption without compromising their bottom line, speed of innovation and market position, along with their goals to reduce carbon footprint. So how are we supporting our customers in their sustainability goals with Aria?
Well, from a guardrails perspective, so one of the things we can certainly do, and it's related to cost as well. So quite often cost and sort of carbon targets can often go hand in hand. If you're burning through a lot of money in your public cloud accounts, chances are that's because you're using a lot of resources, and those resources are using energy that has to be produced and potentially is having an impact on the environment. So it could be that some of the policies you want to put in place are around the use or over provisioning potentially of cloud resources, or the retention of data and images and resources within cloud accounts. So having policies that are put in place and enforced, and can even be sort of automatically put in place as well and remediated, actually goes some way towards helping organizations potentially reduce both their spend and potentially their sort of carbon impact in native public cloud. So that's certainly one way that I would say.
I'd ask the question: how many customers here use DPM?
Distributed power management?
Yeah.
Anyone?
No. I don't think so, to be fair. But I mean, it's been around for a while, right? So there's no reason in our rose-tinted world why you wouldn't power off hosts if you're not using them. So purely without, if we take a step back from Aria Hub and Graph, from an operations perspective, understanding how to best run your environment in its most condensed fashion, reducing the hosts that you need, either offsets the need to buy new hosts or for new projects, so reducing the footprint from a particular cluster base and uses those extra hosts to build a new project, or just powering them down would save money, and heating, power, cooling, energy, and the collective sigh of administrators and all that carbon that gets from there.
And one other thing on the carbon, which just this week I've had some emails going back and forth, and we've been working out where the best place within the suite of products to do this is. But we have people looking at how we actually can take the carbon figures that are published by, say, AWS for a particular region and break that down into, this is how much this VM is emitting in terms of carbon on a daily basis or an hourly basis. So the nice thing is that we have this entity database, and we have all of these properties that are assigned to entities, and we can very easily adapt that data model. It's one of the benefits of GraphQL is we can extend the data model very quickly. And so when we decide whereabouts in the product it should sit, it'll probably be related to cost. So it will probably go into cost. And then they can begin to pull in that information, and that entity information will be available almost instantaneously because of the way that GraphQL stitches together all the different data sources and can extend the entity models without actually impacting what's actually running. So, I mean, it's very technical in terms of how it does it, but basically there's always going to be compatibility between our entity model and our front end. So it's just a case of plumbing in that information into the right places. But those sorts of questions are happening all the time internally from a product point of view, from an engineering point of view. You know, those are being actively looked at and brought into the product as well.
Wouldn't it be quite interesting, actually, if someone was to go and say, well, I need to deploy my application, I want to stick it into the public cloud. Not only are they given a kind of a breakdown of the cost, but maybe a breakdown of the carbon footprint. And perhaps, you know, oh, this is going to exceed, I don't know, 200 grams of CO2 every month or something like that. You need approval for that. And put that sort of gating in there and actually get people to be conscious of the choices they're making. That would be quite an interesting... sorry, I'm not saying this is possible.
So yeah, I was just going to caveat that that's not actually in development at the moment.
You could put a guardrail in place potentially. That's
as long as AWS or the public cloud providers provide that metric, then we can guardrail against it. Yeah. Should we take some questions from the floor? Would that be?
Please.
Does anybody have any questions? Oh, yeah. Oh, there you go, Chris.
So Aria, as its predecessor that we keep accidentally naming, is made up of all these products. If I want to go out and buy an Aria, do I buy an Aria or do I buy an Aria operations and maybe login site, or can I pick and choose, or do I have to buy?
No, it depends what you want to do. I mean, Chris can maybe touch on this a bit better, but you don't have to buy the whole suite. You don't have to buy everything. You can buy point solutions.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So I can use this one as well. So the answer to the question is yes. You can buy a la carte if you want to. You can buy individual products. You can buy suites. You'll get a discount if you buy suites, but you might get more than you want if you buy suites as well. So there's that impact. But actually, added value I think is probably a better term than more than you want. But yes, so you can buy either individual products as on subscription, or you can buy it perpetually. But yeah, typically it's in a suite to get the best value, especially if you're going to do ops and ops for logs, or the artist formerly known as operations and login site. Cool. Any other questions? Yeah. Don't be shy, by the way.
Sorry, it's just I haven't been aware of Aria for a little while. So, is it fair to say that you guys cover the objects that that VMware knows and loves, i.e., virtual machines, containers, and Kubernetes, when you're monitoring and looking at the public cloud? So, not objects like DynamoDB, queuing systems. Presumably, Network Insight will give you some stuff around that. Is that fair?
Actually, so we have direct integration via API with AWS, with Azure, and just being released GCP, and there will be further cloud providers as the customer demand comes for them, and that is a full suite of the services provided. So inside of Aria Hub and Graph, you'll see as a first-class entity a DynamoDB, and you'll also see relationships between, say, a virtual machine running in EC2 that will communicate with DynamoDB, or a pod in Kubernetes communicating with that service. One of the features that I've been working on over the last couple of months that's just been released is a Kubernetes integration, which uses eBPF in the background, and you install it on your Kubernetes cluster, a collector. And then that starts to give you things like metrics at a granular level within pods, but it gives you service-to-service communication, pod-to-service communication. It gives you HTTP metrics, latency. It gives you error rates. You can view a graph of those service communications. So I think historically, VMware's been very good at looking at VMware from a monitoring and operations point of view, and why wouldn't we? We owned the data center more or less, but increasingly it's multi-cloud. We're looking at native public cloud. We're looking at native public cloud first, actually, in Aria Hub and Graph. So, if you go and sign up for a free trial, you can add an AWS account, you can add an Azure account, you can configure some Kubernetes or one Kubernetes environment. But actually, at the moment, you can't add a vCenter server to it, and that's a very deliberate decision from a product point of view, because we don't want people to go, oh, this is just another VMware management tool. This is a cloud native management tool. This is a tool that people can use to look at their entire multi-cloud environment. So, no is the answer to your question.
And we've been doing stuff in ops and automation from a cloud native perspective as well for since 8 came out, really. It's not as granular in terms of the detail that's coming out in Hub and Graph, but because we have to create the integration every time, so it's a little bit of a laborious task to add new services at the moment, but that's changing.
And actually, I have a question back to the audience. And I'm very happy to give away a pair of VMware Cloud Management socks to whoever's the closest. Although
tech marketing budget, woohoo!
I know. Well, I just happen to have.
They
haven't been used.
I don't think I've even.
They have not been used.
I don't think I've even got cloud management socks.
Yeah. Anyway, so I almost forgot my question. Oh no, I remember now. So, interestingly, when you create a new AWS account, how many sort of resources or entities do you think actually exist within that account before you do anything at all? Anyone got any ideas? Go on, shout out.
We can just randomly call out numbers because you're going to be closer than nobody saying anything.
Just say a number.
4, 5,
70.
Do you say 70? Yeah. You're the closest so far. You're closer now. We could go like this. It's nearer 400.
Wow.
It's nearer 400. Yeah, it would have been a while. That's why I thought I'd put you out of your misery. But yeah, and you can actually see that if you onboard a brand new AWS account into Hub and Graph, it will pick up those roughly 400 different objects, entities, and configurations that are stood up by default when you create that account. So yeah, we're going in hard on these cloud accounts. And native public clouds. We want to provide the same sort of I guess control, governance, management feature set across each of the different clouds, whether it be VMware, AWS, Azure, GCP, insert next cloud here. We want to provide the same sort of data, information, experience, and capabilities across all of the clouds. And that was the point I was trying to get to. Who said 77, by the way? Because I think that was
That was Gareth. Gareth doesn't count.
Oh, you don't count. Sorry. There was a? Oh, right. Oh, I'll give you some socks in a minute.
It's just got to go and take them off.
You're lucky.
And I guess that's what we can use guardrails for, though, right? So securing those 400 resources.
And what's quite troubling actually as well is when you onboard that account and it's automatically evaluated against a sort of baseline set of recommendations. Obviously, things like what's it called? One of the AWS services, I forget their names. There's so many. But
plus, apparently.
Sorry,
200 plus. 200 plus, apparently.
But basically, when you onboard that AWS account into Hub, we pick up something like 70 different findings straight away. 70 different things that, range from, moderate risk down to quite low. But still, you think to yourself, would you really want to sort of put your crown jewels, your production data and deployments into an account that hasn't been secured or locked down in some way, shape, or form? Or form. I mean, some of these things are things like, is multi-factor authentication turned on for your root user account and stuff like that. But it's very easy to forget some of those things if you're not, if you haven't got something in place that's actually alerting you to the fact that this configuration hasn't been made, and also if you're going through creating multiple landing zones, so places where you can run your applications, and maybe you've got a landing zone for developers to work in, maybe you've got another one for your public websites, maybe you've got another one for internal applications. Each internal application might have its own landing zone. Each of these is going to be potentially under, the recommended native public cloud frameworks. They're going to be separate accounts. And these separate accounts could have all of those same separate findings against them. And it very quickly becomes a situation that isn't manageable at scale, unless you start to use something like policy as code, unless you start to have something where the tooling discovers these potential findings and potential security breaches.
Okay. Yep.
So have you got the ability to push out any recommendations against the, say, you've got 70 recommendations, and to remediate them, is there a method of, I don't know, are there built-in tasks that can be pushed out, or do we need to have a webhook to create your own automation?
Yeah, so automation for secure clouds, which will kind of be merging in with guardrails and be part of guardrails effectively.
Maybe it's not officially announced yet.
Okay. It
Forget we
might.
said that.
It might, but anyway, I mean, those a lot of those findings can be remediated at the touch of a button. Some of them obviously are going to require human intervention, so it's very difficult to apply multi-factor authentication to an account without human intervention. But what you can also do is we do have within guardrails a library of templates to help get you started. So not only could you take an existing environment and suck in all of the configuration, maybe you've got a known good environment, a known good cloud account. You say, well, this is how we want all of them to look. And you can actually suck in that configuration, make a few changes to kind of generalize that template and reuse it and push it out to other accounts. Additionally, the templates we've got are intended to help you get started, to help you create new landing zones that are secure by default by applying various policies.
Is it worth defining what a template is?
We could be here all day if I did.
But at a high level.
Yeah, at a high level. It's well, YAML.
30 seconds or
We'll
less.
know about that. So yeah, basically sort of a YAML formatted template that describes, is declarative. So it describes the state or the configuration that we want particular objects or resources to be in, or particular policies to be in place. And when we apply that template to a particular environment, we can then guardrails will then monitor, because it's getting a feed from Aria Hub about any changes that come along. It's able to detect whether or not there's sort of changes taking place out of band, if you like, that go against this policy. And if you so desire, it can automatically enforce that configuration again. So can automatically remediate. But at a minimum, it will at least tell you that you're now in violation of that established desired state.
And we do the same thing with, to a certain extent, with secure hosts from a SecOps perspective.
So salt stack SecOps.
Yeah. So we see CIS remediations and so policies and looking at the operating system rather than the infrastructure. Any other questions?
So I think it's probably worth mentioning, we've got it up on the screen, but free tier, you can go and request a free tier account. You can add your own AWS personal account if you wanted to, and set it up and see what happens. You can see, you'll get reports on, for example, the CIS benchmarks from Secure State, and that'll tell you misconfigurations and things like that. You'll be able to, it won't let you remediate them because Secure State is a paid for service. Okay, so this is where
look at what you could have won.
Yeah, well, okay, so we want to show you what the value is of Secure State. We want to say, look, no, this is what we've discovered about your infrastructure. You're perfectly welcome to go and remediate that yourself, and that's fine. But, we're not going to take it away from you. It's the free tier, but we can also provide you with the easy link through Secure State to say this is the remediation button, right? Okay, this is what we're doing. We're selling cloud management services. We're not going to give it all away for free, but free tier is a really good way of actually kicking the tires on it. You can request it yourself. It's not a problem. You'll be able to add an Azure or an AWS account. I think you can add 2 accounts.
Yeah.
You can add a Kubernetes environment. So if you've got a Kubernetes cluster, you can deploy the collector on it. That will instantly give you not only the entities within your Kubernetes cluster, so pods, policies, all the deployment objects.
And that's any Kubernetes conformant cluster, isn't it?
Any Kubernetes conformant cluster. We also, just this last release, as I mentioned, we added an eBPF collector, which allows us to then really analyze the traffic within your cluster as well. And you can really start digging deep into cloud native workloads. You can also, you'll discover Kubernetes clusters if you've got an EKS cluster or an AKS cluster or a GKE cluster within your cloud account. It will discover those and it'll list them out, and you can say one click, attach this cluster to Aria Hub, and then you run the YAML to install the collector, and you've got all of those entities brought in and monitored under Aria Hub, and all that is available in the free tier. So if I want you to remember one thing from today, it's free tier, and you can learn a lot by just going in and clicking around the free tier.
Free
tier.
Not 3, free.
I believe it's free.
Really?
Yeah, with an F.
Free as in doesn't cost you anything.
Yeah. Cool. Question.
Bit of a fun one for you. AWS Azure, you mentioned GCP. Cloud Director. I know you mentioned about trying to steer away from vCenter, so it's not VMware centric, but Cloud Director being cloud.
So that's an interesting. It's an interesting question. It's not an integration that I'm personally working on, so I can't comment. I mean, I know there will be people looking at it. In terms of we as a product manager, I have to look at things in terms of what value is it going to bring our customers. So I absolutely would bring value to cloud providers, but a cloud provider has then got to be able to sell that value on to the customer, right?
It's the multi-tenanted facet of this as well.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. So at present, everything is cloud-based. You're using, Aria logs as a cloud-based service. If you look at all of the tooling that Chris listed up, if you compare that to, say, the list of tools that you've got available in AWS, it's a small amount of tools, by the way. It's not we don't actually have that many, right?
Yeah.
But if you think of each one of them as a service from VMware rather than as an individual product, you start to get a picture of where we're going with that, right? So we have a service for logs, and we have a service for metrics, and we have a service for everything else, and we're bringing those in under Aria Hub and Graph. And when you look at value for MSPs and value for cloud service providers that are using Cloud Director, that's a more tricky proposition to then go, okay, we've brought everything all together, but now we need to split this into the different tenants.
I think there's a different factor as well, because obviously with Cloud Director, you've got, say you can't do edge logging at the moment, you have to use login site and find your own way to present that. You've got VROCs, which is a separate portal altogether. Here you're aggregating all of that information, so it's available. It's just then separating that on a per tenant basis, so that there is one solution for the Aria suite for cloud providers, rather than, right, customer, go to this portal for this, go to this portal for that, go to this portal for the other thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
What I mean.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, it's not, as I said, it's not something that I'm responsible for or looking at this point. So I'm talking off the top of my head here, but yeah,
we have been talking to service providers on how we could leverage it, but I don't think we're that far down that conversation.
Yeah, and so like part of my role is developing an SDK or a development kit that we can hand to MSPs and we can hand to service providers and actually say, you know, this is how you can integrate with our graph, because the most powerful thing about GraphQL and our graph implementation is the ability to stitch other data sources in and to bring those entities into our entity data store and to have all of those things joined up, and the watch is being watch is being flashed.
I was told that one of our speakers has to leave in about 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's right. That's fine. Yeah.
So
all good.
Yeah. So yeah, we are absolutely focused on, first of all, providing that SDK so that third parties can integrate. And that is, I mean, that literally is my priority for this next year. So, you know, it's happening when it initially lands. Yeah. That's down to engineering resources, but we're definitely working on that side of things for sure.
Yeah. So in theory, you could use GraphQL to create your own sort of metrics portal that you can provide to tenants essentially at the moment.
Yeah, and I mean, if I were to take a random guess at how you would do that, you would have an appliance, possibly not, from VMware that has a GraphQL stitching service running on it. You would run your own arbitrary code on that, which could integrate with any of your own third-party tools, and it would pull in the API from VMware, from our Aria Hub and Graph API, and the stitching happens on an appliance, and the execution of execution of your own code and your own integrations happens in your own data centers, but the view you get is a tenanted version of Aria Hub and Graph. Yeah, and don't forget that Aria Hub, the hub part, the user interface part, that's our user interface for the API, but absolutely everything you see, all of the data you see and more, is actually part of that GraphQL API. So primarily for third parties like MSPs and for service providers, you're going to be consuming the API. You're not necessarily going to be reprovisioning the user interface.
Cool.
I was just going to say, but bear in mind how many MSPs there are for VMware. I mean, it's quite a large number of people, a large number of organizations, and yeah, they've got a fairly loud voice. So, you know, they're not going to get left behind, I wouldn't have said. But just based on where we've started, yeah, you know.
So many hours in a day.
Apparently.
But yeah, no, thanks guys for joining. We set up this panel to try and understand more of our customers' needs, try and answer your questions and delve into having this open, honest-ish conversation. So yeah, thank you. We've got some more going on, so it'd be good to understand what you guys want to know and want to hear.
Cool. And it'd be, I was told by marketing, cloud management marketing, not tech marketing, it would be remiss of me not to mention the fact, if I can wake my computer up, we're at AWS Cloud Summit, in June. So we've got a platinum partner, so we'll be there. So if you want to come have a chat, and then we'll be there too.
And if I can add any more incentive to have a look at the free to Aria Hub. When it does eventually become available, there is going to be a free tier of guardrails in there. So
I thought you were going to say a free pair of cloud management socks for everybody that signs up.
I've only got the one pair. I've only got the one pair. Yeah, so there will be some guardrails functionality in the free tier. So well worth scanning.
Are you going to create a TikTok channel for guardrails?
For what?
For guardrails, TikTok or something like that?
TikTok.
Yeah. No? Okay.
TikTok's so last year.
Cool. Okay.
It's all blue sky now.
Thank you very much. Let's not get started on that. Okay. Thank you very much.
Sam's now going to sing a song for you.